From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now! The family of a 15-year-old girl from Dallas, Texas is demanding answers after she was deported to Colombia, despite the fact that she's a U.S. citizen and speaks no Spanish. We'll go to Dallas for the latest, and we'll look at other U.S. citizens who've been deported. Then to New Hampshire, we'll speak with Republican presidential candidate Buddy Roemer. Didn't know he was running?
Who the largest corporate giver is to politicians in Washington? Goldman friggin' Sachs.
Meet the candidate.
Washington is bought and sold.
They don't want you to hear.
Roemer has refused to accept campaign contributions over $100 and rejected all donations from political action committees. Then we'll talk to the New Hampshire town hall participant who questioned another presidential candidate, Mitt Romney, about his statement that corporations are people.
You've said that corporations are people, but in the last 2 years, corporate profits have surged to record highs, directly at the expense of wages. That's in a J.P. Morgan report. Now, it seems that the U.S. is a great place to be a corporation then, but increasingly a desperate place to live and work.
All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. The Obama administration's unveiled a new military strategy billed as a move toward a leaner, streamlined global U.S. force. In sustaining U.S. global leadership priorities for 21st century defense, the U.S. vows a stepped-up focus on the Asia-Pacific region as well as the increased U.S. of drone strikes that have targeted militants in Pakistan, Afghanistan, Yemen, and the Horn of Africa. The plan also touts a reduction in military spending, but only when compared to previous increases. Unveiling the plan at the Pentagon, President Obama said military spending would exceed its levels at the end of President George W. Bush's second term.
We will be strengthening our presence in the Asia-Pacific, and budget reductions will not come at the expense of that critical region. We're going to continue investing in our critical partnerships and alliances, including NATO, which has demonstrated time and again, most recently in Libya, that it's a force multiplier. We will stay vigilant, especially in the Middle East. I think it's important for all Americans to remember, over the past 10 years, since 9/11, our defense budget grew at an extraordinary pace. Over the next 10 years, the growth in the defense budget will slow, but the fact of the matter is this: it will still grow because we have global responsibilities that demand our leadership. In fact, the defense budget will still be larger than it was toward the end of the Bush administration.
The military spending reductions are said to amount to a 4% decline in inflation-adjusted terms. The spending figure also excludes the billions spent on the U.S. war in Afghanistan and ongoing operations in Iraq. On nuclear weapons, the strategy says the U.S. arsenal could be reduced, but fails to offer specifics, saying, quote, "It is possible that our deterrence goals can be achieved with a smaller nuclear force." Obama unveiled the strategy with Defense Secretary Leon Panetta. In a provocative comment, Panetta invoked the ongoing dispute with Iran over the Strait of Hormuz and discussing the prospect of military action abroad.
The nature of warfare today is that as you engage, you have to look at how you do it, what forces do you use to be able to confront that enemy, what exactly is involved. I mean, the reality is you could face a land war in Korea and at the same time face threats in the Straits of Hormuz. We have the capability with this joint force to deal with those kinds of threats, to be able to confront them and to be able to win. That's what counts.
Afghan President Hamid Karzai is calling on the U.S. to immediately hand over control of its military prison at Bagram Air Base. Karzai says he took action based on evidence of massive violations of prisoners' human rights. Both the U.S. and Afghan government have faced criticism for the torture of prisoners and their detention without trial at prisons in Afghanistan. The Republican presidential juggernaut has swept into New Hampshire ahead of Tuesday's primary. On Thursday, the winner of the Iowa caucus, Mitt Romney, and his second-place challenger, Rick Santorum, both took aim at President Obama.
This president is a crony capitalist. He's a job killer. And it's going to keep America from creating the jobs we need for our kids and our grandkids. You know, he said he wanted to create green jobs. I don't think we understood. He wants to give jobs to the people who gave him the green.
I don't think most Americans share the vision that President Obama is selling. That's why it's not succeeding. When he goes around and tries to divide America and aligns himself with Occupy Wall Street, says, that this dividing of America, 99-1, it's not 99-1. It's anybody that makes money and pays taxes and everybody who doesn't. That's the 99-1.
Santorum continues to face questions over his views on same-sex marriage. At a campaign event with college students Thursday night, Santorum was booed after he compared same-sex marriage to polygamy. Former House Speaker Newt Gingrich is hoping to revive his campaign following a fourth-place finish in Iowa. On Thursday, Gingrich criticized Obama's recess appointments of 3 new members for the National Labor Relations Board in defiance of Republican opposition. Gingrich called for defunding the board entirely.
The answer to an imperial president is a Congress which stands in its own rights. And the correct response to what the president just did will be for the Congress to zero out and refuse to fund the National Labor Relations Board.
We'll have more on the Republican race after headlines. The new head of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau has begun his term following his recess appointment by President Obama. Former Ohio Attorney General Richard Cordray was installed as the Bureau's first director after Republicans refused to confirm his nomination. Kicking off his mandate, Cordray delivered a speech vowing to protect Americans from predatory lending and other unfair consumer practices.
Consumers deserve to have someone who will stand on their side, who will protect them against fraud, and who will ensure that they're treated fairly in the financial marketplace. The new Consumer Bureau was created to make sure these things are achieved for all Americans.
In Iraq, the death toll from Thursday's wave of bombings targeting Shia pilgrims has reached 70 people. More attacks targeting Shias were reported in Baghdad today, with at least 2 dead and 20 wounded. At least 10 people have been killed and dozens wounded in a suicide bombing in Damascus, the Syrian capital. The attack comes 2 weeks after at least 44 people died in a similar bombing also in the capital. It also comes ahead of mass demonstrations scheduled for today to protest the failure of Arab League monitors to stem the Assad regime's crackdown on their visit to Syria. At a meeting Thursday in Cairo, Jeffrey Feltman, the U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for Near East Affairs, said the world's waiting a final report from the Arab League on the monitor's findings.
We're all waiting to see what it is that the Arab League will be saying after their meeting on Sunday, and what the interim report is from the monitors here. Because the Arab League, as I said before, has taken on an incredibly important responsibility, and we want to defer right now to that meeting on Sunday and let the Arabs have their own discussions first.
In other news from Syria, the human rights group Avaaz says it believes some 37,000 people have been detained in the Assad regime's crackdown, the highest estimate to date. The group also says at least 617 prisoners have died under torture in government sites since the start of the uprising against the Assad regime. In Egypt, prosecutors are demanding the death penalty for former President Hosni Mubarak and other defendants, including his 2 sons. Mubarak is facing charges for allegedly ordering the killing of around 850 protesters during the uprising against his regime. His trial recently resumed after a 2-month delay. A Texas prisoner who served 31 years behind bars for rape has been released after a judge ruled prosecutors withheld evidence that could have led to his acquittal. Ricky Wyatt, a 56-year-old African-American man, was sentenced to 99 years in prison for a sexual assault in 1980. He'd gone to trial after rejecting a plea bargain for a 5-year sentence. At the time, Dallas police withheld evidence that the victim in the assault had told them Wyatt was far too small to have been her attacker. The victim had also described the attacker as clean-shaven, whereas Wyatt consistently had facial hair at the time. And a former inspector on the original Keystone Pipeline is sounding the alarm over TransCanada's plans for the Keystone XL. Mike Klink, a former Bechtel employee who surveyed the first Keystone Pipeline, says he raised numerous concerns during construction that went ignored. The first Keystone carries tar sands oil from Alberta to refineries in the Midwest, while the XL would extend that route to the Gulf Coast. Writing in Nebraska's Lincoln Journal-Star, Klink describes a number of safety and design flaws, including cheap foreign steel, weak foundations, and rigged safety tests. He concludes, quote, "I am coming forward because my kids encouraged me to tell the truth about what was done and covered up. I am not telling you we shouldn't build pipelines. We just should not build this one," he wrote. Klink says Bechtel fired him for voicing his complaints. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.
And I'm Juan Gonzalez. Welcome to all of our listeners and viewers around the country and around the world.